All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Have you ever wondered exactly what goes on in the cockpit when a plane suddenly loses cabin pressure at 30,000 feet? Well, there is absolutely zero time to panic. Instead, what happens is a rigid, perfectly choreographed sequence of events that pilots must execute flawlessly. Today, we're going to break down that exact survival protocol step by step. We'll map out this strict sequence across 6 distinct phases: the pressurization failure, survival memory actions, declaring the emergency, executing the descent, leveling out, and finally, the post-descent assessment. Phase 1. The pressurization failure. This whole crisis kicks off with a sudden abnormality that demands absolute instant recognition.
It all starts the second the cabin press warning light flashes on. A crew member spots this glaring light and immediately calls out, "Pressurization failure." That's it. 2 words. But that single, precise phrase is the exact verbal trigger that flips the cockpit right into emergency mode.
Now, before anyone even touches a yoke, the crew has to rapidly divide the workload. You've got the pilot flying, or PF, and the pilot monitoring, the PM. The pilot flying instantly checks that the autopilot is on, formally takes over comms and controls, and barks out a critical command to the pilot monitoring: rapid depressurization emergency descend memory actions. Moving right into phase 2, survival memory actions. And yeah, as the name implies, there is zero time to flip through a manual here to figure out what's next. The absolute, literal first priority: both pilots must get their oxygen masks on and crank them to 100%. While they're scrambling to do that, the pilot monitoring snaps both microphone switches over to mask so they can actually hear each other breathe and continue to communicate clearly over the noise. Next up is phase 3, declaring the emergency and alerting air traffic control. With life-saving oxygen now flowing safely, the pilot monitoring jumps on the radio with a very specific, urgent broadcast. It sounds exactly like this: "Mayday, mayday, mayday. SpiceJet 123. Pressurization failure. Request emergency descent to flight level 100. Squawk 7700. They state the problem, demand the descent, and punch in 7700, which is the universal transponder code for a severe emergency. This instantly clears all the airspace below them so they don't hit anything on the way down. Right after firing off that radio call, the PM physically dials their safe target altitude, flight level 100, into the aircraft systems and hits altitude select. For a bit of context, flight level 100 is roughly 10,000 feet, which is basically the standard sweet spot where the air is finally thick enough for everyone on board to breathe without oxygen masks. At the exact same time, the pilot flying is locking down the cabin. They flick the emergency lights on. That gets the flight attendant's attention fast. They flip the seatbelt signs to on so passengers are strapped in for the violent ride that's about to happen. Finally, they get on the PA system and announce emergency descend 3 times. All right, phase 4, executing the descent, also known as the rapid plunge. So the masks are on, ATC knows they're coming down, the cabin is secure, now they actually drop. The pilot flying configures the plane for a massive descent. They ensure the autopilot is locked on, yank the power levers back to flight idle, push the condition levers to max, and dial the indicated airspeed up to maximum by spinning the pitch wheel down. They are essentially commanding the autopilot to dive the plane as fast as structurally possible without breaking its maximum operating speed limit. And then, the plane just plunges. It enters a steep, aggressive dive straight down through the clouds, racing toward breathable air. It feels incredibly intense, but remember, this is a completely controlled maneuver governed strictly by the exact parameters the pilots just fed into the autopilot. Once that nose is pointed down and a dive is firmly established, the pilot monitoring verbally calls out, "Rapid depressurization emergency descend memory actions complete." Hearing this, the pilot flying immediately commands the PM to bring out the formal emergency descent checklist. This is a huge shift, guys. They are transitioning from pure instinct and rapid memory actions back to verified written procedures. Which brings us to phase 5, leveling out and finally reaching breathable air. Boom! At exactly flight level 100, the automated systems kick in, halt that massive dive, and gently level the aircraft out. The immediate life-or-death threat of hypoxia is completely mitigated, but the emergency sure isn't over yet. The crew instantly glues their eyes back to the instruments, specifically rechecking the pressurization dials. If that cabin pressure reading is still sitting at 0, they've got to reconfigure the aircraft systems for the long haul. Acknowledging that big, fat 0 on the pressure gauge, The pilot flying calls for the unpressurized flights with bleeds on checklist. The pilot monitoring pulls out this specific checklist and runs through it step by step to properly set up the plane so they can safely keep flying without any cabin pressure.
And finally, Phase 6, the post-descent assessment.
With the plane stabilized and flying level, the pilots shift 100% of their focus to the folks sitting behind the cockpit doors. The pilot flying gets the cabin crew on the line and asks two absolutely critical questions. Is there any structural damage to the cabin? And are there any severe injuries to the passengers? They have to quickly assess the actual physical and human toll this massive depressurization and aggressive dive just took. Now, if the answer to both of those questions is no, meaning the plane is in one piece and no one is seriously hurt, they can finally take a breath and de-escalate. The pilot monitoring radios ATC to officially cancel the Mayday emergency. At the exact same time, the pilot flying tells the cabin crew to start their routine post-depressurization duties, basically calming the passengers down and getting the cabin ready for a diversion and a safe landing. This entire sequence is just an unbelievable display of pure muscle memory, crystal clear communication, and absolute trust in the checklist process. It's a matter of life and death, executed flawlessly every single time. It really leaves you wondering, right? Could you maintain that kind of strict mechanical discipline to run these exact steps straight from memory while plunging out of the sky? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.